Welcome back. I'm Christopher Brannon with the Coeur d'Alene Public Library and the Cooperative Information Network.
And I'm George Williams at Northeast Kansas Library System in Lawrence, Kansas.
Today we're going to be talking about some quick reset buttons for user credentials. Before we get into that, let me go ahead and share my screen and remind everybody that we are hosted by koha-US, and we are now officially past our 2021 conference, but the link is still available on the website. You can access all the great information that was presented this last week on that page. We have links to the videos and many notes.
I think we have almost all of the videos. Almost all of the presenters agreed to let us video record them. And I think most of the presentations have slides to go with them.
There were some great presentations. So if you haven't watched the videos, if you weren't part of the conference, please do by all means check out those great resources and great presentations. And of course, if you go to the Learn page and down to watch Koha US original training videos, there you will find our latest and greatest videos that we have posted. So we're going to show how to add some buttons to where you set up your credentials in the change password screen so that you can reset a patron's credentials quickly or just the password. This is something that we use at our library. And George, I know that you do something slightly different.
Yes, we don't have a default for the whole system. Each library kind of creates a password and a username based on the rules or what they do, the procedures at each individual library. So I can't put a button in there that really resets credentials to default because there is no system-wide default. I could easily do a button that clears those boxes, but a reset to default can't be done because the default doesn't exist.
So this works well for, in this case, for a library or libraries that are consistent across the libraries with their credentials. For you, what we can do after we go through this is maybe you can show us what you.
I'll show you what I do. Okay. Which is on the add and edit page for patrons, for borrowers. So,
all right. So let's get started. I'm going to cut over to the code. I've already got the code in our jQuery section here. So it may seem fairly simple, but there's a bit to the code.
Just because it's short doesn't mean it's simple, right?
Right. All right, so the first thing that we've got here is we're checking to see if the member password exists. So basically this is checking to see if, let me reveal this page here. So it's checking to see if we're on this page, the pat member dash password.
Right.
So that's basically what this line is. It's checking if we're on that page, then you're going to do this. It's going to create the buttons. So the first button here is for the reset credentials to default. So that's just creating the button. And then the second button for resetting the password. And after that, we have a variable that we've created to grab the borrower number. So it's grabbing that value. It's looking for an ID called borrower number on the page.
Right.
Grabbing the value and storing it in a variable. And then we have another variable here. This is actually, we were talking about this a little bit. I forgot that we are actually using REST API. I've talked about this a little bit at the conference, but we're actually using REST API to grab some patron information. REST API is a great way to grab information that isn't available on the page. And you can do this on the staff side. It's very, very limited on the OPAC side, but you can do this on the staff side. You can grab information without having to depend on a report. Usually anything that I grab information for in my modifications was based off of the get JSON to grab information off a report. It relies on a report that has to exist. So if that report gets deleted, then the modification doesn't work. So this is a good way to do something that doesn't depend on a report elsewhere.
Right, that makes sense.
So I will provide a link to the REST API documentation. The documentation's a little sparse as far as explanation, but hopefully between this example, which will be posted in the wiki, and that documentation, you'll be able to figure some things out. I learned how to do my initial setup on this by talking with a member of the Bywater staff. So we're supported by Bywater, and so Luke actually gave me some assistance in doing this for the first time. But essentially, how this works is you've got a variable set up with it. You're setting up a URL that's pointing to the REST API, and you are grabbing the patron ID and plugging in that ID from the variable that we just created, the user borrower number.
Right.
Plugging that in. So it's combining that with this URL. And then, so basically it's just saying, go to this URL and grab this information from the patron with the patron ID of this borrower number. And it is putting that into an array called patron info array. And our editor always complains about the select command. It works, but I don't know why it's just a warning about the let command, but the let command does work.
Okay.
And it's using Ajax to grab that information. It's making sure that it's not doing asynchronous grabbing, so it's not like getting ahead of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's plugging, here's where in the array, I tell it what pieces of information that I want. So I want the first name, and I want the surname, and I want the card number. You can find out all the fields. Basically, you can get everything you want from the borrowers table, but you want to refer to the REST API documentation. It'll tell you when you're going for this patron table and you're looking up the patron by patron ID, what information you can grab from that. But basically, it is the borrowers table.
Okay.
So we're assigning those three pieces of information into this array. And then we're setting the button functions next. So on the reset defaults button, so the reset defaults is the reset credentials to default. So it's resetting both the username and the password. When you click it, it is going to input on the new user ID. It's inputting the second or the number 2 spot. So I think the array is 0 indexed.
It must be, because you've in that array that you've built up there, you would have first name would be 0, surname would be 1, and card number would be 2. And if your user ID, if what you're using is the user ID is the card number, then that's going to be 0 indexed in order to get that right index.
Yeah. So this will be the 0 the first name would be 0, surname 1, and card number 2. And so card number 2 is what, or the array number 2 is what I'm using here to plug in a value for that field, the new user ID field. So this new user ID is what we're giving value to. And then the password. So yeah, so our library, we're using the username is by default the card number. There are a few cases, especially with staff, where we don't do that. We're a little bit more specific on usernames and passwords. In general, our passwords are set to the patron's last name. So it is plugging in the last name in uppercase, because we do that in uppercase. So it is plugging that into both password fields. So
right, new password 1 and
new password
2.
And then new password 2. So setting those values. And the reset password button basically does that second part. It's just setting the password only.
Right.
So that's pretty much all there is to that. So if I were to go in here, if I reset credentials, it's going to reset both. Let's see if I just type whatever here. It's just going to plug, the correct information for our libraries in there, and then I'll save that. And then if I'm just doing reset only, it's plugging in that information, and it's not touching the username.
Right.
So just some quick ways to reset those. Sometimes we have patrons that change their passwords. They forget what their password is, or we have a staff member that didn't set the password correctly the first time. So we can easily go in there and set those. If we have a staff account that was set up, they don't use the defaults. And so if they ever leave the library, they stop working for the library, we go into their account and we hit the reset credentials, so they're set up like any other patron.
Right.
So,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Let me show you what I've got, and I've got some ideas now. So this is, let's see, let me share. This will be straight from Next, and this isn't a real patron. You can see Next right there, Bob Frosty. Cool.
Yes.
What I've got on our system is when you create a new account or you edit an account, because we have so many different libraries, I've got 2 buttons on the create page that say use the library card number for the username, or use first name dot last name, which is another option that's popular at our different libraries. And then for password, I've got a button that clears the password, but then we've got use last name, or use the last 4 digits of the phone, or use birth date without the slash marks, or use the name of the town they're in, that the library is in lowercase letters, or the patron's hometown in all lowercase letters. That's another one that's really popular. And I've never put them over into the change password area, because just using simple jQuery, where I'm getting all that information from when I created those buttons, isn't from the REST API. It's just values in those other fields on the table. And since those values don't appear on this page, I've never thought of putting them there. But with the REST API, I would be able to do that, because the borrower number is embedded in the page. It's right up here. And so I would be able to use REST API to create a button that says, use new username, make it the first name dot last name, or make it the card number. And I would be able to do another one that says, I would be able to recreate those same 4, because using the REST API, I would be able to grab the phone number or the hometown or the birth date or any of those things that are in the patron record. So I think what we should do is I should go ahead and do that, and maybe we can do a video next week where I can walk through the steps of how I do that. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. You know, I forgot that I was using REST API on this particular code.
Yeah, there's a huge potential there for using REST API to do all kinds of things with jQuery.
And I think that if we can, we'll of course, have the resources linked to this video. But I think that it would be a great idea to follow up with more REST API information so that we can show off more of how we accomplish these things, so we can get more exposure to REST API. It's a great tool.
We can teach people even more ways to break Koha.
Why not?
Sure.
All right. Well, thanks, George, for sharing, and we look forward to seeing what you accomplish with the REST API.
Yeah, cool. I'll let you know when I've got it done so we can record part 2 of this.
All right. Until then.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.